Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me here today to talk about a topic that I think is not only important for you personally, but professionally. And that's the topic of simplicity, or what I like to call killing complexity. The reason that it's so important is because I believe it's the thing that's going to bring the most value to your organizations and to your work in the coming years. Simplicity is how we create value in our work and at our organizations, and most importantly, for our customers. So that's what I really want you to think about here today. How can you embrace simplicity to be able to provide more value today and down the road? So we're going to talk today about three things. First of all, we're going to talk about complexity and how it happens. And it doesn't happen how you think. The second thing we're going to talk about is how other organizations are using simplicity as their new operating system to win within their industries. And then finally, what we're going to talk about are some tips and tricks and just work hacks that you can use right away to start creating that value that's so important using simplification. So let me start by just asking you a quick question to think about as we dive in here. How much complexity do you experience at work on an ongoing basis? Just think about that for a moment. In your everyday work, how much complexity do you come across? A little, some, a lot? Most people, when I ask this question, answer with some or a lot. And if that's how you feel, frankly, you're not alone. Let me show you actually a really interesting study that I think will hit home with many of you. Complexity at work is really overwhelming us. It's keeping us back from being able to deliver that value we were hired to bring in the first place. This study that you see here was done not long ago with Deloitte, and they asked people up to VP level to describe their work and how they experience it. And what was fascinating is almost 75% of them that answered the survey said that their work was either complex or very complex. Now, why is that an issue? I want to make a bold statement so you can see what I think happens with complexity. I think complexity at work is really destroying our organizations, right? It's holding you back from doing what you were hired to do in the first place. There was another great study that was done with CEOs, and SAP did this study. It was a future of work study, and they interviewed thousands of CEOs around the world. And the question was this: what's your number one strategic concern for the future? 70% of those CEOs said their number one strategic concern was complexity and that it was only getting worse. Now, for most people, when they're listening here, they think, well, sure, right? It's a problem. It's a concern because it's a financial drain on the company, right? It wastes money. It wastes time. It wastes all kinds of things. That's true. But the real reason complexity is a problem isn't just financial. Complexity is the enemy of meaningful work. Right? It holds you back from driving innovation, creating growth, having customer satisfaction. Worse is that if you're operating with complexity, you can't move fast enough. And what that means in today's world is that's a problem because speed is much more important than size. Right? Having a great brand isn't enough anymore. Having a lot of great products, a lot of great geographies, it's not necessarily about that if you can't steer the ship fast enough to respond to what's happening in the world. And if you don't believe me that speed is more important than size, I want you to take a look at these organizations and see what I mean. These companies right here, these logos that you're familiar with, these are billion-dollar businesses, many of them less than 15 years old, a few just less than 20. These are companies that have completely disrupted their industries and unlocked untold value by using simplicity as their operating system. So think about this. Uber makes it simple to get a car, right? Airbnb makes it easy to get a place to stay. Twitter, simple to communicate. Dropbox, easy to share files. Kickstarter, pretty seamless for small organizations to try out new products and get them to market faster using other people's money. Netflix, right? Simple to just binge watch your life away. Simple is a way that you drive success. So if we know that simplicity has its benefits, what do we need to be thinking about? Right? What's the real question here? I'll tell you what I think it is. Why do we choose complexity? Right? Why so often do we choose complexity every single day? Well, I'm going to show you what I mean as we start to dive in here. Do me a favor. If you have something in your hands, put it down, because I want to do a little exercise with you. So it's going to be easy, and I promise you'll be able to get this done. Here's what I want you to do. I would like you to tap your head, rub your stomach, and click your heels. Can you do that for me right now? Tap your head, rub your stomach, click your heels. Right? Don't be embarrassed if you're sitting at your desk, just try it. Okay, now everyone that's doing it, let's stop. And here's what I want you to think about. So if I was with you here live, I'd ask you to raise your hand and let me know how many of you could do all three at once. How many of you did all three of those tasks at the same time? Right, the large majority of you did that. Here's the problem. That's not what I asked you to do. Right? I just said to tap your head, rub your stomach, and click your heels. Why do so many of us do all three at once? See, this is a silly but important example. Right? The thing that you did here is you created unnecessary complexity. The bad news is that most of complexity is self-created and unnecessary. The good news is that you can control it. And here's what just happened. Most people here, when you did all three at once, were doing what we've called multitasking, which most people try and do every day. And in some instances, it is productive, but in most, and the science tells us this, you get diminishing returns, and you would have been better off doing each task individually. The other thing that happens is we like to elevate everything to the same level of urgency, right? Every report, every email, every deadline, every decision is urgent. And after a while, that causes fatigue, and we know that it's not true. So how can we stop creating that complexity? Why do we keep falling into that trap? See if this resonates with you. I think that many of us fall into what I'll call the complexity trap. And that typically involves three things. So here's the first. The first part of the trap is that we get less focus because we value inside our organizations more versus less or valuable. Right? I mean, I don't know many people that are promoted or rewarded for managing a smaller P&L, managing less products and services, or less geographies, or less people, or you get the idea. Right? We are rewarded for more. And that also has to do with our to-do list. I mean, think about it. When someone asks you how you're doing, how do most people respond? What do you say? You typically answer with, you're good, or you're busy. Right? You're very busy, because being busy is being valuable. And it's time for us to start to think about, it's not how much you get done on your to-do list. It's what's on your to-do list in the first place. Are you doing just actions, or are you doing valuable work? Number two, in terms of the complexity trap, and this is interesting, this is you get less agility, right, if you're operating with complexity. The result of that is because we're spending so much time inside the company with our meetings and our emails and our reports and our analyzing data that it takes time away from doing the valuable external work. Essentially, what I'm saying is you're trading what we call the telescope for the microscope. Do we need the microscope? Yes. Do we need so much of it? Maybe not. And then the final thing that I think is the most important that happens with complexity is that we have less time for thinking. In fact, I would argue that thinking in many companies has become a daring act. We are more apt to spend our time doing, right, activity versus thinking and driving bigger, strategic, valuable outcomes. So let's talk about thinking. Let's get a little meta about this right now. So do me a favor, and I'd like you to think about right now, when and where do you do your best thinking? Right? I mean, do you ever think about that? When and where do you do your best thinking? Now, if I was having people shout out, what I would say, by the way, is in the morning when I'm having a cup of coffee and it's quiet, when I go for a run, it used to be when I was on airplanes, but we don't do that as much right now. What is it for you? When people answer this question, I'm not surprised by the uniqueness of their answers. I'm actually surprised by the absolute consistency of them. Most people will say things like in the shower, driving a car, going for a run, they're cooking, when they're falling asleep, when they're waking up, right? All those kinds of things. But here's the thing. The answers always have this in common. First of all, where people do their best thinking is usually when they're alone, when it's quiet, and they don't have to think about what they're doing. The other thing that they have in common is that rarely ever, if any time, do people say their best thinking is at work. So a few things for us to take away here, especially as leaders. Everyone thinks differently and needs their own way and time to do it that is best for them. So we have to carve out that time or make a culture that allows them to do that versus being busy. And the second thing we need to think about here in terms of thinking is that, we come up with our best ideas when we're alone, but we build our best ideas when we're together. So next time we have to come up with something new and valuable, give people the alone time first. So then when they get together, they can better build on what other people have thought of. So how do you create that space for thinking? That's what simplification does. It gets rid of the noise so you can actually have the space to pivot and be agile when it matters the most. And what's interesting about what I'm going to show you is the goal of simplicity is not so you can pivot in bad times or difficult times or be able to react better. The goal is so that you can create value proactively, right? That's what simplicity does. It gets rid of the weeds, it weeds the garden, so you have things that are ready to grow. If you don't simplify, you won't have time to think or innovate. Let me show you what I mean. We've seen a lot of champions recently in times of COVID that were able to pivot and be agile because they had this culture already, right? Something bad comes at them and they can change on a dime. You look at Dyson, for example, who makes the vacuums or the hair dryers, the air dryers, and they realized that as a consumer electronics company, that during COVID, there might be a dip in sales. So what do? They think about their business differently. And down at their essence, they were good at design and manufacturing. So in times of change, what did they do? They started designing and manufacturing ventilating systems. This is the Covent, and this was created for healthcare systems in the UK, right? Pivoting quickly, simply. There's another good one I love to talk about, which is OpenTable. What do you do if you're a restaurant reservation system and nobody's going to restaurants? Like it's illegal in some places to do it. Well, you pivot and you say, you know what? We are not a restaurant reservation system. We're a reservation system. And we can partner with lots of new companies we never thought of before, like grocery stores, who typically don't do a good job with technology. And they need help to throttle people in 2-hour increments to keep it safer now during COVID and better manage their inventory so these grocery stores don't run out of things like wine and toilet paper, right? The COVID crucial products. So these are companies that can react, but you want to be the company that is proactive in terms of thinking and agility. And simplicity is how a lot of companies like these here do that. Using simplicity can be informal, like Google. They're pretty simplified in terms of their search experience, but inside Google, they even have cut the crap committees, where informally teams actually designate people to look like anthropologists at their group and tell the leader what's the crap that people do that's unnecessary and should be eliminated right now. Or it goes all the way up to the more formal side of this continuum, like Merck or Pfizer, that have chief simplicity officers, right? That's a thing. Simplicity teams designated to eradicating stupid rules, stupid meetings, and focusing on things that matter. Wouldn't you love to have a chief simplicity officer? So how much do you want to dedicate to simplicity? Well, let me tell you a good thing, and that's the benefits of it. And I mean, if you're not already convinced that simplicity is a good way to go and brings value, let me show you the real benefits and value you can get. The tangible piece is financial. I mean, everyone knows you're going to get savings if you simplify, right? You're going to cut out some of the waste. And what that means when you're a simplified company, and this was taken from a few good studies, but my favorite is from Siegel and Gale. They put out an annual simplicity study, and they just have fantastic stats in here. And one of them is that if you're a simplified organization, you can charge at minimum a 6% price premium versus your competitors because people are willing to spend more money with you, right? You value their time. Your stock price outperforms your competitors by over 200%. That alone is incredible. And your customers are 70% more likely to recommend you. Right? It's like a free sales force. But that's not the real value. Here's the value of simplifying. It's a cultural and ethical thing. It's cultural because people know that they can contribute and do more work that matters. That's what simplicity is, getting to work that matters. People in simplified organizations spend more time doing that valuable work. They are more engaged, right? There's no presenteeism, so to speak. They have better employee retention, and they have more customer satisfaction. It's also ethical, and this is what you're really going to be hearing about more, especially in the HR realms, which is, time is a non-renewable resource. We will never get it back, and how we spend it is the smartest, most important thing we can analyze as leaders. I mean, I don't know why we get so mad at people when they waste our money, but we don't get the same level of upset when people waste our time. If we can focus as an organization and get the work right, you can get the culture right because you'll be doing the work that matters. If your teams are spending time doing meetings and emails all day, that's your culture. If your teams are spending time externally focusing on customers or coming up with new products or working in R&D, that is your culture. So what kind of culture do you want to create? Simplifying helps you do that. So let's think about a couple things. Why is the culture such a piece? And is that really true? How does that come to light? Well, let me show you here. I'm going to show you a slide about this is NB Power, New Brunswick Power. And they're a company in Canada that I just loved working with because they're a regulated industry and they can't just change their pricing. They have to work within certain boundaries, but they still have to meet their profits. So how do they do that besides just massive cost cutting? Well, it was interesting. The head of the nuclear division said, look, I think we just need to simplify. And there's lots of ways we can do that internally and externally for our customers. I'll be the guinea pig and pilot a simplicity program in my company, right? And so the head of the nuclear division said to his employees, he had about 200 in his group, he said, why don't you all tell me by Friday the things that we could change here at work that would make us more efficient and save money? Friday came around. How many suggestions do you think he got? 13. It was kind of a disappointment. He was hoping for more. But he thought about it and he realized, you know what? I asked the wrong question. The next Monday, he sent out an email again to his 200 people and he said, I'd love to get more ideas from you, how we can simplify around here and do more meaningful work for ourselves and for our customers. Give me your ideas by Friday. Just by changing the question, right? From the efficiency, just the financial side, to more of the work that matters side. How many responses do you think he got then? Quite a few. The answer, 837. Framing things in terms of value motivates people to make great, valuable changes. So here's what I'd like you to think about. And this is just something you can scribble later. What would be the impact if we simplified how we worked at our companies? Right? There's hard impacts and there's soft impacts. What would they be? And more importantly, what is holding us back from doing those things right now? I want to give you now some tips, tricks, and some really cool work hacks that I've learned from my clients all over the world that have gotten them time back in incredible ways. All I want to ask of you is to write these down, and of the ones that you like, commit to trying them. Okay, here we go. Let me start with the first one. How can we identify areas to simplify, right? Rather than just saying, let's go and simplify. That's a tall order for people to understand where to start. Identifying areas to simplify is the easiest tip to get started doing, and it gets your team all on the same page. Let me show you how I would go about doing it. What I want you to do is take out a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, I want you to make a T-chart. Now, on this T-chart on the left-hand side, I want you to write down typical tasks, label the top typical tasks. And on the other side, I want you to write desired work. Now, let's start with the typical tasks. I'd like you to think about in an average week or month, depending on your role, what are 20 typical tasks that you do? And I want you to be specific. You can look at your calendar, you can create a log, it's up to you. But most people will write down things like this. They'll say like, I analyze X kind of data, I create XYZ report, I go to ABC status meeting on Wednesdays. If it feels hard, you're doing it right. But we want to get 20 things that you typically do. Once you do, I want you to look at that list. And I want you to circle the things on it that you think are valuable. Here's what you're going to find. You're not going to circle that many things. By the way, this is why you do this exercise alone, because if you ask people how many valuable things they circled, they want to say everything. Right? We all do valuable work, but the reality is we don't. When you look at your list and see which things you circled as valuable, look at what commonalities those things have. Right? What do they all share? And then look at the things that weren't circled. And you have to ask yourself, or ask your team to look at their list and say, if things aren't circled on our list, why are we doing them? The first thing people will say is it's an obligation, they need to do them to get to the next task, that's fine. But what you want to do is the things that aren't valuable, you want to get rid of them and make space for the things we're about to talk about, which is the right-hand side of this chart, the desired work. Now, when you ask people what do they wish they were doing, sometimes they can't say because they haven't thought about it. This is the chance. If you could list 20 tasks again that you wish you could do, what would they be? What would be the desirable work? And you'll see people write down things like this. They'll write down things like, I wish we could meet with more innovative partners. I would explore more breakthrough business models. I would meet with my clients and customers more. You get the idea. Here's the thing. On the left-hand side, those tasks are typically internal, and they can be draining when people describe them. On the right-hand side, this is the definition of valuable, meaningful work that you and your team have now just come up with. And those things tend to be more external and energizing. So that's how you identify ways to simplify. That's the first thing. Now we're going to go to the second one. And this is it's a home run every time I bring this one up. And that's killing stupid rules. I mean, how many of you would love to kill stupid rules right now at work? The unnecessary, mundane things that you do all the time that just are holding you back. Killing stupid rules is a powerful, impactful, immediately impactful tactic you can use with yourself or with your team. And here's how it works. It's really simple. If you could kill any 2 rules that would help you be more effective, innovative, do more valuable things, what would those rules be and why? Now, there's a couple rules, by the way. The 2 rules I would give people when you play this game together is, first of all, there's red rules and green rules, right? Things that are industry mandated, government regulated. You'd go to jail if you got rid of those rules. Don't, those are red rules, don't get rid of those rules. But everything else is fair game. And then the second rule is only talk about the rules in your sphere of control, right? The work your team does every day, because that's the low-hanging fruit for you. Here's what you're going to find. People will come up with a lot of ideas, a lot of unnecessary stuff that they should just get rid of right away. The second thing you'll find, though, is most of it is not rules. It's assumptions, cultural norms, policies, procedures, things that we have created and now we can undo. So killing stupid rules is a great way to get people on board so we question the assumptions around how we work. All right, let me go to the next one. And this is actually really fun. This is when people actually post stupid rules. And one thing you can talk about with your team is once you actually get that list of rules, well, which rules should you kill? Which ones are more important than others? Well, you can plot them. And we actually do a 2x2 in terms of how easy or hard it would be to implement getting rid of that rule. And at the bottom, this is a chart showing the impact it would have, low to high, if you did it. So the top right quadrant here that you see is when people came up and they posted their rules on this quadrant. You can do this online with a Google Jamboard. Those were their rules that they put up there that were easy to get rid of, they thought, and would have a high impact. And of course, that's the low-hanging fruit. If something that you quantify is easy to get rid of and would have a high impact, why would you still be doing it? And then here's the next one I want to share with you, and this is our last piece. I think it's each of our jobs to become a chief simplification officer, right? All of us could be that. The great thing about simplification is it's free. It doesn't cost you anything typically to do it. So how can we put people in charge of it with daily hacks? Here's things in terms of daily work that I've learned from clients all over the world that I think you should consider doing yourself. So let's tackle the stuff that most people are irritated by every day. So the first one would be, of course, emails. If you are flooded with inbox stuff and you want to get more control over it, do a couple things. You can use NNTR, like they do at Merck. NNTR stands for no need to respond. So anytime in your subject line you have something that is meant to be a one-way communication and you don't need people commenting back like, thanks, I got it, appreciate it, you can use NNTR and people know no need to respond back, and you can cut down your inbox traffic by 13% like Merck did. Or you can use BLUF. BLUF is a term a lot of folks in the military use, which is bottom line up front. We spend too much time in our emails leading up to our point. It's time for us to state our key point at the beginning and then unfold it from there. It'll save everybody time and it'll focus to be more focused in our communications. BLUF. Right, but what about meetings? What if you could simplify meetings? You could, like we did with Sprint, do a zombie meeting audit. Audit all the meetings that you have and take a look at them and say, which ones could we kill right now? Which have outlived their time? If you can't get rid of them, maybe you can change the frequency of them, or what I like to say, go on a time diet. You know what they say about meetings, especially virtually now, is that 30 is the new 60 and 15 is the new 30. See what meetings you can really cut back on because maybe they don't require as much time as you thought. All right, how about another one? How about processes? You can run a work hackathon like we've done with Novartis and at Google. We have all these tech hackathons. Why don't we have work hackathons? A lot of people have ways to hack work. And you have to think that, you know, if most people are doing the workaround for the process, maybe that should become the process. And then finally, identify time sucks. A lot of people, if you ask them, what are your biggest time sucks? There are things with the way you do reports, the way decisions get made, all kinds of things. Identifying time sucks will get you time back immediately with your team. And then finally, a last tip here is around behavior. You know, they say, tell me what you say yes to, and I'll tell you what you value, right? Tell me what you say yes to, and I'll tell you who you are. We spend a lot of time saying yes to things, one without thinking and two out of obligation. And it would be really better served if we started realizing how to say no so we could do things that mattered. So when you go forward, how can you say yes with intention and no with purpose? So we've learned a lot, right? We've talked a lot about things. And I guess the question I would have for you all as you're going off now is, which tip would you try first, right? Would you identify time sucks? Would you kill stupid rules, right? Would you get rid of zombie meetings? Would you NNTR? Which one tip would you try now to simplify your work? Simplifying your work has a lot of benefits. All of us can be simplifiers, right? It's in our DNA. We like to simplify and we like to focus. It's us as leaders giving people the permission to do it. It's modeling that behavior of saying no or getting rid of meetings that aren't necessary. And it's being able to focus on things that really bring value versus being busy. I hope that you learned something new today. And I hope that you can really see the value that simplicity can bring and how complexity drags you down. I really hope that this helps you get to the work that matters. It is a pleasure to be here and talk about this topic, and wishing you the best of luck simplifying. Thank you.